Hey guys, tonight we're going to a place where more soldiers died than on any battlefield. We're not talking about a glorious last stand or a heroic charge. We're heading into the heart of the 19th century military camp, a place that was, for hundreds of thousands of young men, a far more dangerous and deadly environment than combat itself. We're going to explore why these great temporary cities of tents and hope were such brutal, efficient breeding grounds for disease. It's a story about the unseen enemies of a soldier's life filth: contaminated water, bad food, and the tiny, invisible germs that thrived in the appalling lack of sanitation. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't have survived it. Forget the bullets for a second. The daily diet of hardtack biscuit and salt pork would have been a challenge enough. But the real test would be the camp's sanitation, which was often a polite suggestion that thousands of men should try to use the same general area as a toilet, preferably not right next to the water supply. The number one killer in the American Civil War wasn't the enemy, it was diarrhea. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's a quiet and simple way to support the channel. And while you're at it, I'd love to see where and when you're tuning in from. Go ahead and drop your city and local time in the comments. It's always a little fascinating to see our community of history lovers spread across the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first sight of the great Union Army camp is a vision of geometric, patriotic perfection. You arrive on a wagon, having traveled for days to reach the vast encampments outside Washington, D.C. The year is 1862. The war is still young, and it is still a thing of hope and glory. As your wagon crests a small hill, the camp spreads out before you and you catch your breath. It is a city of white canvas tents, stretching for miles in every direction, laid out in neat, precise rows that form company streets, regimental avenues, and brigade boulevards. The Stars and Stripes flies from a tall flagpole in the center of it all. The air is filled with the sound of 1,000 bugle calls echoing each other, the rhythmic tramp of marching feet, and the sharp, shouted commands of drill sergeants. It is a sight of immense, ordered power, a living testament to the industrial might and patriotic fervor of the Union. You are here not as a soldier, but as a camp follower. Perhaps your husband or your brother is in one of these regiments, and you have come to be near him, to earn your own living in the shadow of the great army. You are a laundress, one of the thousands of women who have found it necessary, if unglamorous, place in the vast, mobile ecosystem of the war. You make your way to the area designated for your kind. The camp followers, the sutlers, the cooks, the blacksmiths, the laundresses, the seamstresses live in a more chaotic, less orderly section on the periphery of the main military camp. You set up your small tent and your tools of the trade: 2 large wooden tubs, a scrubbing board, a heavy iron for pressing, and a precious supply of harsh lye soap. The soldiers themselves are a wonder to behold. They are so young. They are mostly farm boys from places you have only ever seen on a map. Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania, Maine. They are filled with a naive, almost heartbreaking excitement. This is the great adventure of their lives. They have come to save the Union, and they believe, with an absolute and shining certainty, that the war will be over in a few months, after one great glorious battle. They have no concept of the long, miserable, and dirty reality that awaits them. You quickly learn the geography of your new home. It is a temporary city, but it has all the features of a permanent one. There is a main street, a long, muddy road known as the Sutlers' Row. The sutlers are the officially licensed civilian merchants who follow the army, selling their wares from the back of large, brightly painted wagons. Their row is a kind of mobile shopping mall, a commercial heart for the camp. They sell everything a soldier might desire and cannot get from the army itself: better quality tobacco, jars of pickles, tinned peaches, warm socks, writing paper, pocket knives. The prices are fantastically inflated, but the sutlers have a captive market. They seem to believe that patriotism ought to be profitable. Your own life settles into a routine of hard, endless labor, but in these early days, there is a sense of purpose, of being a part of a great and noble cause. You are not just washing shirts, you are keeping the army of the Republic clean. You are doing your part. You look at this vast, orderly city of tents, and it seems like a model of military efficiency. The tents are aligned in perfect grids. The soldiers drill for hours each day, their movements becoming sharp and synchronized. The daily life of the camp is governed by the sound of the bugle, a series of calls that dictates every moment, from the pre-dawn blast of reveille to the final. Mournful notes of taps at nightfall. But as you spend more time here, you begin to see the cracks in the facade of order. You begin to understand the great debate that future historians will have about this army. Was the Union Army, at the beginning of the war, a truly competent, well-oiled machine? Or was it a chaotic, amateurish affair, a collection of state militias and political appointees, a force that had to learn the brutal lessons of logistics, of sanitation, of warfare itself, from scratch, through bitter and bloody experience? You see both. You see the impressive drills in the fields, but you also see the poorly dug latrines. You see the soldiers, farm boys with no experience of living in such close quarters, throwing their garbage and their waste wherever is most convenient. You see the supply wagons struggling to bring in enough food for the tens of thousands of men. The army knows how to drill a soldier to march in a straight line. It does not, it seems, yet know how to manage the sewage of a city of 100,000. But these are small, seemingly insignificant problems. The men are healthy, their spirits are high, and the cause is just, you take your place in the social fabric of the camp. You get to know the men of the regiment you serve. You learn their names, their stories. You are their laundress, their confidant, their connection to the world of women and of home. They pay you a few cents to wash their single. Government issue wool shirt, and you take pride in returning it to them clean and pressed. The jokes among the men are those of any army. They complain about the food, about the sergeants, about the endless drilling. The food is a constant source of complaint. It is a monotonous, uninspired diet of coffee, salt pork, and the infamous hardtack. The soldiers joke that their hardtack biscuits are so old and so hard that they were likely baked during the Revolutionary War. They joke that you could stop a bullet with one, but they are healthy. They are strong. And their complaints are the good-natured grumbling of men who are well-fed and bored. One evening, you stand at the edge of the camp as the sun is setting. The sky is a blaze of orange and purple. Across the vast fields, thousands upon thousands of campfires are being lit. A new constellation appearing on the face of the earth. The air is filled with the sound of the soldiers singing. They are singing patriotic songs like the battle cry of freedom, and they are singing sad, sentimental songs about the girls they left behind. Their voices, thousands of them, join together in a great, powerful, and deeply moving chorus. You stand there, listening, and you are filled with a profound sense of awe and of belonging. You are a part of this great, magnificent, and hopeful adventure. This great, orderly, and invincible city of tents. You are sure that nothing can possibly go wrong. The initial, breathtaking awe of the great military camp, with its perfect rows of white tents and its air of patriotic purpose, begins to fade, replaced by the monotonous, back-breaking reality of your new life. You are a camp follower, a laundress, and your trade is not one of glory or of spectacle. It is a trade of sweat, of steam, of harsh lye soap, and of the endless Sisyphean task of trying to bring a small measure of cleanliness to a world that is fundamentally, profoundly, and increasingly dirty. Your domain is a small patch of trampled earth on the edge of the camp, in a section the soldiers have nicknamed Sud's Row. Here, You and a few dozen other women have set up your operations. It is a chaotic, smoky, and constantly damp neighborhood of canvas tents, of long clotheslines strung between trees, and of great iron kettles steaming over open fires. You learn the hard, physical rhythm of your work. Your day begins before dawn, when you go to the nearby creek with the two heavy wooden buckets to fetch your water. In these early days, the water is still relatively clear and cold. You then must haul the water back to your tent and heat it over your fire, a task that requires a constant supply of firewood, which you must either gather yourself or buy at an inflated price from an opportunistic local farmer. Then comes the washing. The soldiers, your clients, bring you their laundry in great, bundled heaps. It is mostly their single. Government issue wool flannel shirts, their rough woolen trousers, and their small clothes. You take the clothes, you sort them, and you begin the long, arduous process of scrubbing them clean on a corrugated washboard in your wooden tub. The lye soap is harsh, and by the end of the first week, your hands are red, raw, and chapped. It is a job with endless work and terrible working conditions. And your clients are thousands of young men who seem to be masters of finding new and interesting ways to get dirty. After the scrubbing comes the rinsing, the wringing out of the heavy, waterlogged wool, and the hanging of the clothes on your lines to dry. And finally, the pressing, with a heavy flat iron that you heat on your fire. A final touch of civilization that earns you a reputation among the soldiers as a laundress of quality. You are not just washing their clothes, you are, for a few cents a shirt, giving them a small, temporary connection to the clean, orderly world of home. You are not alone in this work. Suds Row is a community in itself, a small, independent city of women within the larger city of men. You get to know the other laundresses. They are women like you, wives and mothers who have followed their men to war, widows with no other means of support, young, single women seeking a kind of rough independence that is unavailable to them back home. It is a tough, competitive, and often gossipy community, but there is also a deep, unspoken bond between you. You are all women, making your own way in a man's world. Your washtub's the source of your livelihood and your freedom. This is a world that future historians, particularly those interested in the history of women and of labor, will study with great interest. Were you and your fellow camp followers seen as respectable, hardworking contributors to the war effort, a civilizing influence on the rough soldiers? Or were you viewed with suspicion by the military authorities and the respectable society back home as morally loose and disreputable women living outside the bounds of traditional society? You know that the truth is a complex mixture of both to the soldiers you serve. You are a respected and necessary part of their lives. To the generals and the politicians, you are a necessary, if slightly unruly, part of their logistics. The soldiers become your friends, your surrogate family. They bring you their laundry, and they bring you their stories. They tell you of their homes in faraway states, of their sweethearts, of their boredom, of their growing impatience for the great battle that is always rumored to be just a few weeks away. You become their confidant, their sister, their mother figure. You darn their socks, you sew on their buttons, and you listen to their hopes and their fears in these early healthy months of the camp. The work is hard, but it is straightforward. The laundry you wash is stained with the honest dirt of a soldier's life, with the sweat of the drill field, with the dust of the road, with the occasional smudge of grease from cleaning a rifle. But as the weeks turn into a month, and then two, and the great army remains in its vast, static camp, you begin to notice a change. It is a subtle change at first, a change in the very nature of the filth you are washing. The camp, which had seemed so clean and so orderly from a distance, is revealing its true nature. It is a city of 100,000 men, with no sewers, no plumbing, and only the most rudimentary understanding of sanitation. The latrine trenches are too few, and they are dug too close to the camp's water supply. The offal from the thousands of slaughtered cattle is not properly buried. Great piles of manure from the thousands of horses and mules accumulate. The ground becomes a saturated, foul-smelling quagmire. The clear, cold water of the creek where you fetch your water begins to run cloudy and brown. It begins to smell, and the laundry begins to change. The stains are no longer just the honest sweat and dust of a soldier's work. You begin to receive bundles of laundry that are soiled in a different, more unpleasant way. You begin to see the unmistakable, yellowish-brown stains of diarrhea. At first, it is just a few soldiers, but soon it is dozens, then hundreds. The first great, invisible enemy of the camp has arrived. Not the enemy in gray uniforms, but the enemy that is in the water, in the food, in the very soil of the camp itself. It is the scourge of every army in history, dysentery. The bloody flux. You see the effects all around you. The men are no longer just bored. They are sick. They are weak. They complain of constant, debilitating stomach cramps. The lines for the surgeon's sick call in the morning become longer than the lines for the sutler's wagons. Your work as a laundress becomes a much grimmer, more difficult task. You are now washing the linens of sick men. The smell of the soiled laundry is foul, and a new fear begins to creep into your own heart. You wash your own hands with a new, frantic energy. You know, from instinct and from old wisdom, that there is a connection between this filth and the sickness that is beginning to sweep through the camp. The jokes of the soldiers, once about the bad food, are now about their own constant, miserable affliction. They are no longer an army of proud, confident warriors. They are an army of men with chronic, debilitating stomach problems. The final, terrible confirmation of this new reality comes one afternoon. A young soldier, a boy from Ohio you are particularly fond of, a boy who has always brought you his laundry with a cheerful smile, comes to your tent. He is carrying his bundle of soiled laundry, but he does not smile. His face is pale and drawn. He looks at you with eyes that are full of a deep, profound shame. "I am sorry, ma'am," he whispers, not meeting your eye. It is bad again. You take the bundle from him, and you see that the cloth is not just stained with the usual filth of dysentery. It is stained with dark, unmistakable streaks of blood. You look at the boy's pale, ashamed face, and then you look out, over the great, magnificent city of tents, and you see it now not as a symbol of hope and of glory, but as a great, beautiful, and fatally flawed machine. A machine that is slowly, quietly, beginning to poison itself from the inside out. The clean, white canvas of the camp is a lie. The truth is in the dirty laundry you hold in your hands. The sight of the blood-stained laundry from the young Ohioan soldier is a quiet, terrible omen. You are a laundress, a woman whose trade is in the intimate, unglamorous realities of other people's lives. And your trade is telling you that the health of this great, hopeful army is beginning to rot from the inside out. The dysentery, the bloody flux, which was at first a scattered problem, is now a constant, miserable feature of camp life. Every bundle of laundry you receive tells the same story of sickness and debility. Driven by a practical, laundress's curiosity and need to understand the source of the filth, you are now forced to wash every day. You begin to observe your environment more closely, your daily errands, particularly the constant, back-breaking task of hauling water. Take you on a tour of the camp's inner workings, and what you see reveals the catastrophic, systemic failures that are turning this proud military city into a breeding ground for disease. Your tour begins with the water source itself. The camp is situated along a pleasant, winding creek, its water once clear and cool. This creek is the camp's lifeblood. It is the source of all water for drinking, for cooking, and for your own laundry business. But you notice that the creek's character changes as it flows through the camp, upstream, above the main encampment. The water is still relatively clean, but as it moves through the heart of the great city of tents, it becomes a slow, brown, and increasingly foul-smelling sewer. You see the cavalrymen washing their horses directly in the stream, the water churning with mud and manure. You see soldiers bathing their own dusty, sweat-soaked bodies in the same water that other men, further downstream, are collecting for their morning coffee. But the greatest source of contamination comes from the latrines. The army, in its attempt to impose order, has designated specific areas for the men's latrines, or sinks, as they are called. But the design and placement of these facilities is a masterpiece of sanitary self-destruction. The latrines are simple, open trenches, dug into the earth. And you notice, with a growing sense of horror, that many of these trenches have been dug on the high ground that slopes down towards the creek. You watch as a sudden summer rainstorm turns the camp into a sea of mud. And you see the brown, contaminated water from the overflowing latrine trenches trickling in small rivulets down the hillside and directly into the camp's only water supply. The army is, in effect, systematically poisoning itself. The problem is not just the latrines, it is the disposal of all the camp's waste. The butchers who slaughter the cattle for the army's daily meat ration simply throw the offal, the guts, the heads, the hides into a great, stinking pile a few hundred yards from the main kitchens. This pile, as the summer heat intensifies, becomes a monstrous, buzzing, and rotting monument to the army's short-sightedness. The thousands of horses and mules in the transport lines produce a literal mountain of manure, which is left in great, steaming heaps. Its runoff also seeping into the soil and the water. You are witnessing the great logistical problem of a 19th century army. How do you manage the waste of a temporary city of 100,000 men? The answer is that you don't. Not effectively. The army's commanders are masters of drill, of tactics, of moving men across a battlefield. But they are amateurs in the science of public sanitation. Their own medical theories do not help. The army's surgeons are all believers in the prevailing medical science of your time, the miasma theory. They believe that diseases like dysentery and fever are caused by a miasma, a foul air or a pestilential effluvium that rises from a decaying organic matter. Their primary concern is not the germs in the water, a concept which does not yet exist. Their primary concern is the smell, and so their sanitation efforts are focused on odor control. You see them order the latrine trenches to be moved, not because they are contaminating the water, but because the wind is blowing the smell into the officers' tents. The new latrines are dug in a place where the smell will blow over the tents of the common soldiers instead. It is a very democratic approach to public health. They order barrels of tar to be burned, believing the strong. Clean smell of the tar smoke will purify the air. The camp now smells of filth and of tar, a new and unpleasant combination. As the summer deepens, a new plague arrives, a direct consequence of the accumulating filth. The flies, they rise in great, black, buzzing clouds from the offal pits and the latrine trenches. They are a constant, crawling, irritating presence. They land on the food in the kitchens. They land on the faces of the sleeping soldiers. They move, without distinction, from the filth to the food, their tiny, hairy legs covered in an invisible cargo of sickness. You, with your simple, practical wisdom, know that these creatures are a part of the problem. You shoo them away from your clean laundry with a frantic energy. This is the great, unanswered question that future military historians will debate. How could this army, the army of a modern, industrial nation, be so ignorant of the basic principles of hygiene? Was it a failure of discipline among the farm boys who made up the ranks? Men who were unused to living in such crowded conditions? Was it the arrogance of the army's command, who prioritized drill and discipline over the less glamorous science of sanitation? Or was it simply that the logistical challenge of managing the waste of such a massive, mobile city was an unprecedented and almost unsolvable problem in the mid-19th century? as you try to find a clean spot in the creek to rinse your laundry. Suspected as all of these things, the consequences of these catastrophic failures are becoming more than just the chronic. Miserable dysentery. A new, more deadly sickness begins to appear in the camp. It starts in a regiment from New York, one that is camped in a particularly low-lying, swampy, and foul-smelling section of the encampment. A soldier develops a high, persistent fever. He complains of a headache and a weakness so profound he cannot stand. And then a strange faint, rose-colored rash appears on his chest and abdomen. It is not the flux, it is something else, something more serious. The regimental surgeon calls it typhoid fever. You do not know that typhoid is a bacterial infection, spread through the ingestion of food or water contaminated with the feces of an infected person. You do not know that the flies that rise from the latrine trench and land on that regiment's food are the perfect vectors for this disease. You only know that this new fever is a killer. The men who get it often die. The camp, which you once saw as a city of hope and patriotic glory, is now, to your eyes, a great, beautiful, and poorly designed death trap. Its water is poison. Its soil is contaminated. Its air is filled with flies that feast on both filth and food. You watch as the army, which is so diligently preparing to fight the human enemy in front of them, is being silently, efficiently, and systematically destroyed by the invisible enemy within its own ranks. You finish your day's laundry. You boil your own drinking water now. A strange and time-consuming new ritual. You look at the neat rows of tents stretching out before you in the evening light, and you realize that your job as a laundress has given you a unique and terrible perspective. You are the first line of defense, the first person to see the evidence of the sickness that is consuming this army. And you know, with a certainty that chills you to the bone, that the trickle of bloody flux you have seen is about to become a flood, and that the new fever is just beginning its work. The real war is not the one the soldiers are drilling for. It is the one that is already being fought and lost. In the guts of every man in this camp, the bundle of laundry from the young soldier from Ohio is a prophecy. In the weeks that follow, the trickle of sickness in the great Union camp becomes a river, and then a flood. Your world, which was once defined by the honest smells of wood smoke. Canvas and soap is now saturated with a new, inescapable, and deeply unpleasant odor. It is the sour, sickly sweet smell of dysentery, and it becomes the new perfume of the Army of the Potomac. The first great scourge of camp life is not the enemy's cannons, but the soldiers' own bowels. The bloody flux, as the men call it, sweeps through the regiments with the speed and impartiality of a wildfire. It is a great democratic affliction, striking down the fresh-faced farm boy from Maine and the tough city laborer from New York with equal, miserable force. Your life as a laundress is now a descent into a special kind of hell. Your washtubs are no longer filled with the simple, honest dirt of a day's drill. They are filled with the evidence of a widespread, debilitating sickness. The work is foul, and it is heartbreaking. You see the strongest, most boisterous young men you have come to know reduced to weak, pale, and deeply embarrassed invalids. They bring you their soiled linens with their heads down, their faces flushed with a shame that is almost as painful as the cramps in their bellies. You are not a doctor, but you have a laundress's practical wisdom, and you can see the causes of this plague of the flux all around you. You see it in the brown, murky water you are forced to haul from the creek. The same creek that serves as the camp's laundry, its bathing spot, and, horrifyingly, the runoff basin for its overflowing latrines. And you see it in the food the men are forced to eat. The diet of the Union soldier is a monotonous, nutritionally barren, and indigestible trinity of salt pork, hardtack, and coffee. The salt pork is so heavily brined that it is practically pickled, a tough, greasy meat that challenges the strongest digestion. The hardtack biscuits are infamous, sheets of unleavened flour and water baked to the consistency of a clay brick. And the coffee is a bitter, burnt brew that the men rely on for warmth and for a small jolt of energy. There are no fresh vegetables. There is no fruit. There is nothing green. It is a diet that seems almost scientifically designed to cause intestinal distress. Even without the added excitement of drinking contaminated water, the Army's medical staff, the regimental surgeons, are completely overwhelmed, and they are fighting the wrong enemy. You see them at work. Their understanding of the disease is based entirely on the flawed miasma theory you witnessed in your last life. As a stonemason in ancient Rome, they believe the flux is caused by a noxious effluvia, a bad air that rises from the damp ground and the foul-smelling latrines. Their treatments are a collection of useless and often contradictory interventions. For some men, the surgeon prescribes a large dose of castor oil or another powerful purgative, believing they must cleanse the bowels of the corrupting humors. For others, they prescribe the opposite large doses of opium, the only effective medicine they have. Not because it cures the disease, but because it causes constipation, literally stopping the flux in its tracks for a few. Brief and blessed hours of relief, the surgeon's main cure for diarrhea. You note with a dark irony, is a drug that makes you unable to go to the bathroom. The soldiers themselves, seeing the failure of the official medicine, turn to their own folk remedies. You see men chewing on pieces of charcoal from the fire, believing it will absorb the poisons in their gut. Others brew a bitter tea from blackberry root or the bark of an oak tree. Traditional astringents that they swear will help to bind them up. But nothing truly works. The sickness is in the water they drink with every meal. In the food they eat from plates cleaned with that same water. The psychological toll of the epidemic is immense. A soldier signs up to fight for the Union, to face the enemy in a glorious battle. He imagines the possibility of a heroic death from a bullet or a cannonball. He does not imagine himself dying a slow, weak, and deeply humiliating death from a foul-smelling intestinal ailment in a crowded, stinking tent hundreds of miles from home. This is not a good death. It is a miserable, unglamorous, and deeply embarrassing one. The constant sickness erodes the morale of the army. The men are weak. They are irritable. The cheerful singing around the campfires is replaced by a sullen quiet, punctuated by the sounds of men groaning in their tents. The great, powerful army that you saw drilling with such proud precision just a few months ago now seems like a vast, disorganized hospital. An army of invalids. This is the great debate that military historians will have. What is the true cost of disease in war? Is it just the number of men who die, or is it the more subtle, but equally devastating impact on a soldier's morale, on his will to fight, on his belief in the cause he is supposed to be dying for? You see the answer in the faces of the men whose laundry you wash. They are not heroes anymore. They are just sick men who want to go home. Your own life is a constant, exhausting routine of hauling, scrubbing, and boiling. You now boil all the water you use. Not just for the laundry, but for your own drinking and cooking. It is a time-consuming, laborious process. And the other laundresses think you are eccentric. But you have seen too much to take any chances. Your small tent, with its clean water and its careful hygiene, becomes a small island of sanitation in a great, continental sea of filth. One evening, you are delivering a clean, pressed shirt to the young soldier from Ohio, the one whose bloody laundry had been such a terrible omen. You find him in his tent, lying on his cot. He has been suffering from the flux for weeks, and he is now dangerously thin and weak. But as you enter, you know immediately that something has changed. The air in his tent is different. It is not just the sour smell of dysentery. There is a new smell, a hot, feverish, and more malignant smell. The boy is shivering violently. Though the night is warm, you place a hand on his forehead. It is burning with a dry, intense heat. A different kind of fever from any you have felt before. And as you lean closer in the dim lantern light, you see them on the skin of his abdomen, peeking out from under his shirt, are a few, faint but unmistakable, rose-colored spots. It is not just the flux anymore. It is the other camp fever, the one the surgeons call typhoid, the one that is spread by the flies, by the contaminated food, by the very filth you have been watching accumulate for months. The one that does not just sicken, but kills. You look at the young soldier's fever-bright eyes, at the telltale spots on his skin, and you feel a new and far deeper sense of dread than you have ever felt before. The camp, this brutal breeding ground for disease, has been a miserable and unpleasant place for months. But you know, with an absolute certainty, that it is about to become a deadly one. The first great scourge of dysentery was just a prelude. The true, lethal plague of the camp is about to begin. The blood on the young Ohioan's linen is not just a sign, it is a prophecy fulfilled. The dysentery that has plagued your camp for months, the miserable bloody flux, has been the slow, grinding work of a blunt instrument. But now a sharper, swifter, and far more lethal blade has been unsheathed. The arrival of typhoid fever marks the moment your camp transforms from a merely unhealthy place into a truly deadly one. You report the boy's condition to the regimental surgeon. He comes, he looks. He confirms your fears. The rose-colored spots on the abdomen, the sustained high fever. The delirious state, it is unmistakably the typhoid fever that has been whispered about in other, less fortunate regiments. The young soldier from Ohio dies 3 days later, and he is not the last. The typhoid spreads through the camp with a terrifying efficiency. It is a disease that thrives on the very conditions you see all around you. You, a simple laundress with no medical training, can see the simple, horrifying logic of its transmission. You see the swarms of flies, the great, buzzing black clouds of them, that rise from the open, stinking latrine trenches, and you see those same flies landing, moments later, on the uncovered slabs of salt pork in the company kitchens, on the bread that is left out on the tables, on the lips of the sleeping soldiers in their tents. You do not know the word bacteria. You have no concept of a microscopic germ, but you have common sense. You see the flies moving from the filth to the food, and you understand that they are carrying a poison with them. You are arriving at a crude, practical, and entirely correct version of germ theory through the simple act of observation. The Army's surgeons, however, do not see this. They are learned men, but their learning blinds them. They are still trapped in the ancient and respectable theory of miasma. They believe the typhoid is caused by a pestilential exhalation from the damp soil, or a noxious vapor given off by the nearby swamp. Their response is to fight the smell, not the source. They order more barrels of tar to be burned. They recommend that the soldiers chew on a piece of charcoal, believing it will absorb the bad air. The soldiers, for their part, have their own theories. They whisper that the typhoid can be cured by drinking a spoonful of gunpowder mixed with whiskey. It is a desperate, explosive remedy for a desperate time. It does not work, but you imagine it at least makes their last few moments more interesting. This is the great, frustrating debate of your time, played out in the lives and deaths of these young men. How could an army of a modern, industrial nation, an army with educated physicians, be so blind to the obvious connection between filth and disease? Historians of the future will debate this question. Were the doctors of your time simply ignorant, lacking the theoretical framework of germ theory to understand what they were seeing? Or was it a kind of institutional stubbornness? A refusal to believe that the cause of a great and terrible fever could be something as simple and as disgusting as the contents of a latrine trench as you frantically shoo the flies away from your tubs of clean laundry. Suspect it is a bit of both. Your own life becomes one of obsessive, private sanitation. You are a woman who lives in a city of filth, and you have decided to build your own small, clean fortress. You boil every drop of water you use. For drinking, for cooking, for your final rinse. The other laundresses think you are mad, that you are wasting precious firewood. But you see the sickness in the laundry you wash, and you are terrified. You keep your small tent meticulously clean. You cover your own food at all times. You have declared a one-woman war on the flies. They are winning. Of course, they have more troops and a vastly superior supply line. But you fight your small, desperate battles every day. The typhoid epidemic takes the chronic misery of the camp and turns it into an acute. Daily horror. The death toll rises. The sound of the burial details. The men assigned to collect the dead becomes a constant presence. You see them carrying the bodies, wrapped in their army blankets, to the growing graveyard on the hill. These are not men killed in battle. These are boys killed by a fever they caught from a fly, from a cup of contaminated water. You begin to see the true cost of this invisible war. You see a young soldier, a boy you know from your laundry route, sitting outside his tent, weeping. You learn that his two brothers, who had enlisted with him, who were in the same company, have both died of the typhoid fever in the last week. He is now alone. You see the toll it takes on the surgeons. Dr. Miller, the regimental surgeon you first met, is a changed man. His professional confidence is gone, replaced by a haunted, helpless exhaustion. He has no cure. All his medicines, his purgatives, his opium, are useless against this fever. He can do nothing but watch the men die. You realize that he, in his own way, is also a victim of this disease. It is destroying his profession, his science, and his soul. The camp is no longer a functioning army. It is a pest house. The drills have stopped. The patriotic singing has ceased. The only sounds are the coughing of the sick, the quiet weeping of the grieving, and the constant, maddening buzz of the flies. The army, which had been so confident, so full of hope, is being defeated without ever seeing the enemy. It is rotting from the inside out, a victim of its own ignorance and its own filth. And just as the despair in the camp reaches its absolute rock-bottom lowest point, a new kind of person arrives. You see them one afternoon, a small group of civilians, riding into the camp in a clean, handsome carriage. They are men and women, dressed in the fine clothes of the city. They are not sutlers or family members. They carry themselves with an air of authority and of intense, almost scientific, purpose. They are representatives of a new organization you have heard whispers about, the United States Sanitary Commission. They are a civilian group created by prominent citizens in the North, dedicated to fighting the very enemy that is destroying your army. They are not fighting the Confederacy. They are fighting filth. They are fighting disease. You watch as they begin their work. They do not talk to the generals about strategy. They do not talk to the soldiers about bravery. They walk through the camp with notebooks, and they look at the things no one else is looking at. They look at the latrines. They look at the water supply. They look at the kitchens. They look at the hospital tents. They are mapping the sources of the sickness. They are horrified by what they find. You see them speaking with the camp's commanders, their voices sharp and full of a righteous, civilian anger. You see them arguing with the army surgeons, challenging their miasma theories with a new, radical idea of sanitary science. They are a new kind of army, an army of reformers, of sanitarians, of men and women who believe that the war against disease is just as important as the war against the rebellion. You watch them, and for the first time in months, you feel a small, fragile flicker of hope. You're not a doctor, you're not a general, you are just a laundress. But you know, with an unshakable certainty, that these people, with their notebooks and their obsession with drainage and clean water, are the only people who have any real chance of saving this sick, dying army from itself. The battle for the health of the camp is about to begin. The arrival of the United States Sanitary Commission, with their notebooks and their air of righteous civilian authority, is a strange and novel event in the camp. But for you, their presence is a distant, administrative concern Your world has become small, focused, and personal. It is focused on the young soldier from Ohio, the boy whose bloody laundry was a prophecy, and who now lies burning with the typhoid fever. You learn that he has been moved from his company tent. He has been taken to the regimental hospital. The hospital is not a building. There are no stone walls, no clean, quiet corridors. The regimental hospital is simply a collection of large canvas tents, set apart from the main camp. Usually in a place that is slightly upwind, a testament to the surgeon's belief in the miasma theory. It is a place that the healthy soldiers speak of only in hushed, fearful tones. It is a place you go to, but rarely come back from. You decide you must visit him. You feel a strange sense of responsibility, of connection. You have been a witness to his decline, a washer of his sickness. You spend one of your precious coins at a sutler's wagon to buy a small, hard lemon candy, a taste of something sweet and clean, a pathetic offering in a world of misery. You hold the small candy in your hand, and you make your way to the hospital tents. You push aside the canvas flap and you step inside, and you enter a different circle of hell. The air itself is a physical assault. It is a thick, hot, and complex stench of unwashed bodies, of sickness, of sweat, of blood, of human waste, and of the harsh, chemical smell of the chloride of lime that is sprinkled on the floor in a futile attempt to combat the odor. The light is dim, filtering through the canvas in a murky, yellowish gloom. And the sound is a low, constant, multi-layered symphony of human suffering. The groans of men in pain, the shallow, ragged breathing of men with pneumonia, the weak, persistent coughing, the delirious muttering, and, weaving through it all, the high, buzzing drone of thousands of flies. The tent is long and narrow, and it is filled, from end to end, with rows of crude wooden cots, packed so tightly together that there is barely room to walk between them. On every cot lies a sick or wounded man. You see men suffering from the lingering, debilitating dysentery. You see men burning with the high fever of typhoid. You see men with measles, with mumps, with all the common diseases of childhood that have become deadly killers in this environment of malnourished, exhausted young men. This is the great, brutal truth of your war. The real enemy is not the Confederate Army. It is this. It is the microscopic, invisible enemy that thrives in the very conditions of military life. For every man who will die from a bullet in this war, 2 will die right here, in a tent like this. From a disease, the care, what little there is provided by a handful of overworked hospital stewards and by other soldiers who are themselves recovering from their own illnesses. They are convalescent nurses, men who are barely strong enough to stand, tending to men who are even sicker than they are. You see the regimental surgeon, Dr. Miller. He is a different man from the one you have seen in the camp. Here, in his own terrible kingdom, he is a figure of immense, if helpless, authority. His apron is stained with blood. His face is gray with a fatigue so deep it seems to have settled into his very bones. You watch him work, and you see the great paradox of the medicine of your time. You see him tend to a man who was injured when a cannon misfired. His leg shattered. Here, the doctor is a man of shocking, brutal, and undeniable skill. You see his surgical kit, a beautiful, terrifying thing of polished steel, the saws, the probes, the scalpels, with the patient rendered semi-conscious by a large dose of opium and a chloroform-soaked sponge held over his face. The surgeon performs an amputation with a speed and a precision that is breathtaking. He is a master craftsman, a butcher with the hands of an artist. He can save a man from a cannonball, but then he moves to the next cot, the cot of a man shivering with typhoid fever. And here, this man of great surgical skill is utterly, completely, and pathetically helpless. He has no tools for this fight. He cannot cut out the fever. He cannot saw off the infection. He looks at the man. He feels his pulse. He sighs, and he prescribes a dose of whiskey with a little quinine in it. His entire medical arsenal against the war's greatest killer is a shot of bitter liquor. This is the great. Tragic debate that will be had about the surgeons of your war. Were they the ignorant, callous sawbones of legend who amputated limbs without a thought? Or were they dedicated, hard-working, and often highly skilled professionals who were simply practicing in the last moments of a pre-scientific age? Men who were masters of the physical, visible world of trauma, but utterly defenseless against the invisible world of germs watching Dr. Miller. You see that they were both. You find your young soldier from Ohio? He is in a cot in the corner. He is barely recognizable. His face is skeletal. His skin has the dry, papery texture of the deeply dehydrated. His eyes are open, but they are glassy, unfocused. He is delirious. Muttering about the green fields of his home, you sit on the edge of his cot. He does not know you are there. You take out the small lemon candy you have brought him. You unwrap it. You gently try to place it in his mouth, hoping the small, sweet taste might bring him a moment of comfort. But he cannot take it. He does not have the strength to even close his lips. You sit with him for a long time, simply holding his hot, dry hand. You are a laundress. You have no medical skill, but you know, in this moment, that your presence, the simple human act of being there, is the only real medicine left in this tent of despair. The soldier dies just after dusk. It is a quiet passing. His ragged breathing simply stops. A hospital steward comes, confirms that he is gone, and unceremoniously pulls the rough wool blanket over his face. There is no time for grief. The cot is needed for the next sick man who is already waiting. You walk out of the hot, stinking, and hopeless hospital tent and back into the cool night air of the camp. The air has never smelled so sweet. You look up at the stars. You hear the distant sound of a bugle playing taps. The final, mournful call of the day. You look at the thousands of campfires, at the thousands of healthy young men who are still singing, still telling stories, still dreaming of the glory of the coming battle. But you have seen the end of their story. You have seen the place where so many of them will finish their great adventure, not on a glorious battlefield, but here, in a dirty, crowded tent, dying of a fever, tended to by a helpless surgeon. You have seen the war's true face, and it is not the face of an enemy soldier. It is the pale, feverish, and dying face of the boy from Ohio. Your visit to the regimental hospital tent is a journey across a border. You have crossed from the world of the living camp, with its routines and its rough camaraderie, into the antechamber of the dead, the face of the young Ohioan soldier. His life quietly extinguished by a fever in that stinking crowded tent becomes a permanent fixture in your memory. You have seen the war's true face, and it is not a face of courage and glory, but one of quiet, helpless, and undignified suffering. This knowledge changes your relationship with the soldiers you serve. You no longer see them as a great, boisterous, and invincible collective. You see them as individuals, as fragile bodies, each one a potential host for the invisible enemy that is stalking your camp. When you look at a group of young men laughing and playing cards, you can't help but wonder which of them will be next. Which of them will you be visiting in that terrible tent a few weeks from now? And you begin to understand the profound difference between the two great fears that govern a soldier's life, the fear of battle and the fear of disease. The army is finally on the move. Your encampment, which has been a static city for months, is being broken down. The Great Peninsula Campaign has begun, and the army is advancing on the Confederate capital of Richmond. The mood in the camp is electric. The long, boring wait is over. There is a sense of excitement, of purpose, and of a sharp, clean fear You see the men as they prepare for a real battle. A skirmish with the enemy forces that are now just a few miles away. They clean their rifles with a focused intensity. They write last-minute letters home. There is fear in their eyes, yes. The fear of death is a natural and sensible thing, but it is a different kind of fear. It is a fear mixed with adrenaline, with a sense of camaraderie, with the hope of glory, to die in battle, to fall in a great charge while fighting for the Union. It is a death that has meaning. It is a sacrifice that will be remembered, that will be honored. It will be a story told back home, a source of pride for a grieving family. It is, in the strange and terrible calculus of war, a good death. But then, a few days later, a new rumor of a fresh typhoid outbreak in a neighboring regiment sweeps through the camp, and you see a different kind of fear on the men's faces. It is not the sharp, clean fear of the battlefield. It is a dull, quiet, and creeping dread. It is the fear of the bad death. The fear of the hospital tent is far greater than the fear of the enemy's cannons. To be struck down by a bullet is an act of fate, a moment of tragic, but swift, glory. But to be slowly, inexorably, consumed from within by a fever, to waste away over weeks in a filthy, crowded tent, to die of a foul, humiliating intestinal ailment, far from home. Surrounded by the groans of other dying strangers, this is a death with no honor. It is a death of pure, biological misery. It is a lonely, anonymous, and shameful end. This is the great psychological truth of your war, a truth that future historians will uncover in the letters and diaries of the soldiers. The vast majority of them feared a slow, wasting death from disease far more than they feared a quick, violent death in combat. Your own role in the camp begins to shift. You are still a laundress, your days still filled with the hard, physical labor of your trade, but you have another skill that has become increasingly valuable. You can read and write. Many of the young farm boys who make up this army are barely literate, and many of the men who are sick are too weak to hold a pen. And so, you become a letter writer. You become the conduit for their last words, their final messages to the families they will never see again. You sit on a crate outside the hospital tent, a piece of paper on your lap, a pencil in your hand. And the soldiers, the ones who are still well enough to speak, tell you what to write. They do not ask you to write of glory, of battles, of their bravery. They ask you to write of home. They dictate letters filled with a profound and heartbreaking homesickness. They ask about the harvest, about a favorite dog, about the girl they were hoping to marry, and they ask you to lie. Tell my mother I am well. A young man from Pennsylvania whispers to you, his voice a hoarse croak, his body burning with the typhoid fever. Tell her the army food is good, and that I am strong. Tell her not to worry. You look at his pale, sweating face, at the rose-colored spots on his chest, and you know he will be dead in a week, and you write the lie. You write a cheerful, hopeful letter, filled with reassurances. You become a professional writer of fiction. You're only subject the false comfort of a distant mother. You witness the stark contrast between the two kinds of death firsthand. You know a pair of brothers, two young men who enlisted together from the same small town in Massachusetts. They are inseparable. One of them, the younger one, is chosen for a dangerous reconnaissance mission. He is shot and killed by a Confederate picket. His death is hailed as a heroic sacrifice. The captain of his company writes a long, eloquent letter to his family, describing his bravery, his devotion to the Union. His name is listed in the regimental roll of honor. He has achieved a good death. His older brother, who was in the hospital tent with a severe case of dysentery on the day his brother was killed, is devastated by the news. His own will to live seems to vanish. His condition worsens a week later. He dies, alone and delirious, from a secondary infection. His death is a quiet, miserable, and unheroic event. He is just another number in the surgeon's logbook. There is no official letter to his family, no mention in the roll of honor. His is a bad death, and you are the one who writes the final letter to his grieving mother. You are the one who must try to find the words to give this sad, anonymous, and miserable death some small shred of meaning and dignity. You find that you cannot tell the truth. You cannot write that he died of a humiliating bowel complaint in a stinking tent. So you lie again. You write that he died peacefully, that his last thoughts were of his family, that his death was a release from the suffering of his wounds you have just invented. You have become a curator of good deaths for men who have suffered terrible ones. The great academic debate among future historians will be about the disconnect between the heroic narrative of the Civil War and the grim, unglamorous reality of the soldier's experience. The newspapers back home are filled with stories of great battles, of bravery, of noble sacrifice. But the soldier's own letters and diaries are filled with a different story. A story of boredom, of mud, of bad food, of sickness, and of a constant, grinding misery. You are living at the very heart of that disconnect. You finish the letter to the mother of the two dead boys. You seal it, and you feel the immense, crushing weight of the lies you must now tell, the fictions you must create, to protect not just the families back home, but the very idea of the war itself. You have come to understand that the war has two fronts, the one against the enemy in gray, and the other, more deadly, and far more miserable war, the one against the invisible enemies within your own camp. And in that second war, there are no heroes and there are no good deaths. Your visit to the regimental hospital tent is a journey across a border. You have crossed from the world of the living camp, with its routines and its rough camaraderie, into the antechamber of the dead, the face of the young Ohioan soldier. His life quietly extinguished by a fever in that stinking, crowded tent, becomes a permanent fixture in your memory. You have seen the war's true face, and it is not a face of courage and glory, but one of quiet, helpless, and undignified suffering. This knowledge changes your relationship with the soldiers you serve. You no longer see them as a great, boisterous, and invincible collective. You see them as individuals, as fragile bodies, each one a potential host for the invisible enemy that is stalking your camp. When you look at a group of young men laughing and playing cards, you can't help but wonder which of them will be next. Which of them will you be visiting in that terrible tent a few weeks from now? And you begin to understand the profound difference between the two great fears that govern a soldier's life, the fear of battle and the fear of disease. The army is finally on the move. Your encampment, which has been a static city for months, is being broken down. The Great Peninsula Campaign has begun, and the army is advancing on the Confederate capital of Richmond. The mood in the camp is electric. The long, boring wait is over. There is a sense of excitement, of purpose, and of a sharp, clean fear. You see the men as they prepare for a real battle, a skirmish with the enemy forces that are now just a few miles away. They clean their rifles with a focused intensity. They write last-minute letters home. There is fear in their eyes. Yes, the fear of death is a natural and sensible thing, but it is a different kind of fear. It is a fear mixed with adrenaline, with a sense of camaraderie, with the hope of glory, to die in battle, to fall in a great charge while fighting for the Union, is a death that has meaning. It is a sacrifice that will be remembered, that will be honored. It will be a story told back home, a source of pride for a grieving family. It is, in the strange and terrible calculus of war, a good death. But then, a few days later, a new rumor of a fresh typhoid outbreak in a neighboring regiment sweeps through the camp, and you see a different kind of fear on the men's faces. It is not the sharp, clean fear of the battlefield. It is a dull, quiet, and creeping dread. It is the fear of the bad death. The fear of the hospital tent is far greater than the fear of the enemy's cannons. To be struck down by a bullet is an act of fate, a moment of tragic, but swift, glory, but to be slowly, inexorably, consumed from within by a fever, to waste away over weeks in a filthy, crowded tent, to die of a foul, humiliating intestinal ailment. Far from home, surrounded by the groans of other dying strangers, this is a death with no honor. It is a death of pure, biological misery. It is a lonely, anonymous, and shameful end. This is the great psychological truth of your war, a truth that future historians will uncover in the letters and diaries of the soldiers. The vast majority of them feared a slow, wasting death from disease far more than they feared a quick, violent death in combat. Your own role in the camp begins to shift. You are still a laundress, your days still filled with the hard, physical labor of your trade, but you have another skill that has become increasingly valuable. You can read and write. Many of the young farm boys who make up this army are barely literate, and many of the men who are sick are too weak to hold a pen. And so, you become a letter writer. You become the conduit for their last words, their final messages to the families they will never see again. You sit on a crate outside the hospital tent, a piece of paper on your lap, a pencil in your hand, and the soldiers, the ones who are still well enough to speak, tell you what to write. They do not ask you to write of glory, of battles, of their bravery. They ask you to write of home. They dictate letters filled with a profound and heartbreaking homesickness. They ask about the harvest, about a favorite dog, about the girl they were hoping to marry. And they ask you to lie. Tell my mother I am well. A young man from Pennsylvania whispers to you, his voice a hoarse croak, his body burning with the typhoid fever. Tell her the army food is good, and that I am strong. Tell her not to worry. You look at his pale, sweating face, at the rose-colored spots on his chest, and you know he will be dead in a week. And you write the lie. You write a cheerful, hopeful letter, filled with reassurances. You become a professional writer of fiction. You're only subject the false comfort of a distant mother. You witness the stark contrast between the two kinds of death firsthand. You know a pair of brothers, two young men who enlisted together from the same small town in Massachusetts. They are inseparable. One of them, the younger one, is chosen for a dangerous reconnaissance mission. He is shot and killed by a Confederate picket. His death is hailed as a heroic sacrifice. The captain of his company writes a long, eloquent letter to his family, describing his bravery, his devotion to the Union. His name is listed in the regimental roll of honor. He has achieved a good death. His older brother, who was in the hospital tent with a severe case of dysentery to fight that day, is devastated by the news. His own will to live seems to vanish. His condition worsens. A week later, he dies, alone and delirious, from a secondary infection. His death is a quiet, miserable, and unheroic event. He is just another number in the surgeon's logbook. There is no official letter to his family, no mention in the roll of honor. His is a bad death, and you are the one who writes the final letter to his grieving mother. You are the one who must try to find the words to give this sad, anonymous, and miserable death some small shred of meaning and dignity. You find that you cannot tell the truth. You cannot write that he died of a humiliating bowel complaint in a stinking tent. So you lie again. You write that he died peacefully, that his last thoughts were of his family, that his death was a release from the suffering of his wounds, wounds you have just invented. You have become a curator of good deaths for men who have suffered terrible ones. The great academic debate among future historians will be about the disconnect between the heroic narrative of the Civil War and the grim, unglamorous reality of the soldier's experience. The newspapers back home are filled with stories of great battles, of bravery, of noble sacrifice, but the soldier's own letters and diaries are filled with a different story, a story of boredom, of mud, of bad food, of sickness, and of a constant, grinding misery. You are living at the very heart of that disconnect. You finish the letter to the mother of the two dead boys. You seal it, and you feel the immense, crushing weight of the lies you must now tell, the fictions you must create, to protect both the living and the dead from the awful, unglamorous truth of this war. You have come to understand that the war has two fronts, the one against the enemy in gray, and the other, more deadly, and far more miserable war, the one against the invisible enemies within your own camp. And in that second war, there are no heroes, and there are no good deaths. The world of the camp has become a place of two distinct fears the loud. Sharp and honorable fear of the enemy's cannons, and the quiet, creeping, and shameful fear of the hospital tent. You, who live at the intersection of the soldiers' daily lives and their slow decline, have come to understand that the second fear is by far the greater of the two. The Army continues its slow, slogging campaign through the Virginia Peninsula. The fighting is sporadic, but the dying is constant. The great military machine seems to be grinding to a halt, its gears clogged not by Confederate resistance, but by the mud, the dysentery, and the typhoid that have become the Army's constant companions. The surgeons are helpless, the commanders are frustrated, and the men are losing hope. It is into this atmosphere of quiet, simmering disaster that a new and entirely unexpected force arrives. You see them first as a strange procession on the main camp road. It is a line of clean, sturdy wagons, not the usual filthy Army supply wagons, but civilian ones. Their canvas covers stamped with a strange device and the words, U.S. Sanitary Commission. The men and women who ride with the wagons are also a strange sight. They are not soldiers. They are civilians, dressed in the clean, dark, respectable clothes of the cities back north. They carry not rifles, but notebooks and surveying instruments. They look at your camp, at its mud and its filth and its listless, sick soldiers, with an expression of profound and righteous horror. This is your first encounter with the great civilian crusade of the war. The United States Sanitary Commission is a powerful and influential private organization, born of the realization that the government and the Army are catastrophically incapable of caring for the health of their own soldiers. They are an army of volunteer nurses, of doctors, of engineers, of reformers, and of determined society ladies, and they have come to wage their own war, not against the Confederacy, but against the filth that is killing the Union Army. You watch as they begin their work. They are led by men like Frederick Law Olmsted, the great landscape architect, a man who sees your camp not as an army, but as a poorly designed and fatally unsanitary city. They do not look for the enemy. They look for the sources of the disease, their agents, armed with their notebooks. Perform a meticulous inspection of your camp, and they document everything you have known for months. They measure the distance from the latrines to the water supply. They take samples of the foul water from the creek. They note the grate, rotting piles of offal from the slaughter pens. They inspect the soldiers' food, the salt pork, and the weevil-infested hardtack. They create a systematic, scientific, and utterly damning report on the Army's incompetence. And then they begin to fight back. They descend upon the Army's command with the force of a moral hurricane. You see them. These well-dressed civilians, arguing with the generals, with the colonels, with the Army's own surgeons. The conflict is a great clash of cultures. The Army command is a closed, traditional, and deeply hierarchical world, and they do not take kindly to being told how to run their own camps by a group of interfering amateurs from back home. The Army surgeons are particularly hostile. Their own medical theories are still based on the ancient idea of miasma, of bad air. The Commission's agents, while they do not yet have a full germ theory, are proponents of a new sanitary science. They believe that disease is caused by filth, by contaminated water, by a lack of ventilation, and they believe it can be prevented by cleanliness. The surgeons see this as a simplistic, almost childish idea. They are concerned with the grand, invisible forces of pestilential vapors. The Commission is concerned with the location of the toilets. The surgeons see the Commission as a threat to their own professional authority. You overhear one of them complaining, "We have a war to fight, and these people are bothering me about the proper depth of a drainage ditch." The surgeon's cure for the camp's diseases is to prescribe more whiskey and opium. The Commission's cure is soap and onions. This is a great historical debate. A bureaucratic turf war fought in the middle of a military one. Was the Army's medical department a hopelessly backward institution, resistant to the new science, or was the Sanitary Commission a group of arrogant, if well-intentioned, civilians who did not understand the practical realities of managing a great army in the field? The truth, you suspect, is a bit of both, but the Sanitary Commission has two powerful weapons on its side. First, they have immense political influence back in Washington, with direct access to President Lincoln himself. Second, and more importantly, they have money. Millions of dollars, raised through great sanitary fairs in the northern cities. Great patriotic festivals where the public donates money and goods for the relief of the soldiers. And so, you begin to see the results of their work. The Sanitary Commission's wagons begin to arrive in your camp, laden with a kind of cargo you have not seen in many months. It is food, but it is not the usual Army issue of salt pork and hardtack. It is barrels of fresh potatoes and onions. It is crates of pickled cabbage. It is cans of condensed milk. It is a shipment of actual, life-sustaining vegetables. These are the sanitary stores, and their arrival in the camp is a cause for celebration. For the first time in months, the men will have something to eat that is not salted, dried, or infested with weevils. The Commission's influence begins to change the very landscape of the camp, under their insistent, relentless pressure. The Army Command grudgingly begins to implement their recommendations. You see work details being organized, not for drill, but for sanitation. New latrine trenches are dug, this time downstream from the water supply, and the men are ordered to cover them with a fresh layer of earth each day. Drainage ditches are cut through the muddy company streets. The great, stinking piles of offal and manure are finally, belatedly, buried. You, the laundress who has been quietly boiling her own water for months, feel a sense of profound vindication. You have been a lone practitioner of sanitary science in a world of filth. And now, these people from the city have arrived and have declared your own private, common sense crusade to be the official policy of a national organization. The changes are small, and they are met with the grumbling resistance of the soldiers who are now forced to do the hard, unpleasant work of cleaning up their own mess. But the changes are real. One afternoon, you are doing your laundry in the creek, and you notice that the water is different. It is still muddy, still not clean, but it is slightly less brown than it was before. The overwhelming, foul smell has lessened. Just a little. It is not a miracle. It is not a great victory. But it is a beginning. It is a glimmer of hope. It is a sign that reason, that science, that simple practical common sense, can sometimes, even in the midst of a great and terrible war, begin to win its own small, but essential battles. The war against the filth has finally found its generals, and you are one of their most loyal, if unacknowledged, foot soldiers. The arrival of the Sanitary Commission is not a sudden, miraculous cure, but it is a beginning. It is the arrival of an idea, a new and radical idea in the world of your army, the idea that filth itself is an enemy, a foe as dangerous as any Confederate sharpshooter. Under their constant, hectoring pressure, a slow and grudging war against the camp's own squalor begins. But the true cure for the diseases of a static. Filthy encampment is a simpler one movement. In the spring, the great army finally rouses itself from its winter lethargy. The campaign begins. The order comes down to break camp. A great chaotic energy fills the air. Tents are struck, wagons are loaded, and the vast, sprawling city of tents, which has been your home and your prison for so many miserable months, dissolves back into an empty, muddy field. Scarred with the ghost of its own filth, a sense of immense relief sweeps through the ranks. You are leaving the sickness behind. You are leaving the foul water, the stinking latrines, the haunted hospital tents. The army is on the march, and the road itself feels like a kind of cleansing. The march is a hard life, but it is a healthier one. The men are in the open air. Their bodies are engaged in the hard, physical work of moving. They are no longer concentrated in a single, festering spot. And for a time, the rates of sickness seem to decline. The men's spirits lift. They are soldiers again, not just invalids waiting to die. After several weeks of marching and skirmishing, the army finds a new place to make a long-term camp. It is a beautiful spot, a wide green meadow on a slight rise, with a clear, fast-flowing river at its base and a stand of tall pine trees for shade and firewood, compared to the muddy, swampy, and exhausted ground of your old camp. It is a paradise, and this time you all think things will be different. The lessons of the last camp, taught by the grim statistics of the death ledger and reinforced by the stern lectures of the sanitary commission agents who still travel with you, have been learned. Or so it seems. The new camp is laid out with a new scientific rigor. A great deal of thought is given to the things that were once afterthoughts. You watch as the engineers direct the work. The tents for the men are pitched on the high ground. The horse lines and the slaughter pens are placed far downstream. And most importantly, the latrine trenches, the sinks, are dug in a carefully chosen spot. Far from the tents and on the opposite side of the camp from the river, there's a new sense of order, of cleanliness, of hope. The river water is clear and cold. The air smells of pine needles and fresh earth, not of sickness and decay. You set up your own laundry station by the riverbank, and the simple act of washing a shirt in clean water feels like a luxury, a miracle for a few weeks. It feels as if you have truly escaped the old enemy. The rates of dysentery drop. The typhoid fever seems to have vanished. The men are healthy. The camp is clean. The false hope is a beautiful, intoxicating thing. But an army is a difficult beast to keep clean. It is a creature of immense appetite and immense waste. And the discipline of sanitation is a fragile thing, easily broken by the daily pressures of laziness, of convenience, of simply being a tired and homesick young man who doesn't want to walk a quarter of a mile in the dark to find the designated latrine. The decline begins slowly. You are the first to notice it. Of course, your work is the barometer of the camp's health. You notice a few more shirts with the familiar, faint stains of the flux. Nothing to be alarmed about, just a few isolated cases. Then you notice the changes in the environment around you. The clean, pristine campsite is beginning to show the signs of wear. The signs of being inhabited by 10,000 men who have a casual disregard for their own filth. The ground around the company kitchens becomes littered with discarded food scraps and greasy water. The area behind the tents becomes a dumping ground for personal refuse. The discipline of the latrines is the first to go completely. The daily order to cover the trench with a fresh layer of earth is ignored. The sinks once again become open, stinking pits, a paradise for the swarms of flies that seem to appear out of thin air. And you see it in your water source. You walk upstream one day to find a cleaner spot to do your washing, and you see a group of soldiers further up the river, using a quiet pool to wash their clothes and themselves, soaping their filthy bodies in the very water that the rest of the army will be drinking downstream. You are witnessing the great, timeless debate of military life play out before your eyes. Who is to blame for the chronic unhealthiness of military camps? Is it the fault of the individual soldiers, these young, uneducated farm boys who lack the personal discipline and the scientific understanding to keep their own environment clean? Or is it a failure of command, a failure of the officers who prize battlefield drill and the polishing of brass buttons over the mundane? But infinitely more important, discipline of sanitation and hygiene. Looking at the soapy, contaminated water flowing towards you, you decide there is more than enough blame to go around. The camp, which had been your paradise, Your clean slate is now slowly, inexorably, recreating the same toxic conditions of the one you left behind. You can take the army out of the cesspool, but you cannot, it seems. Take the cesspool out of the army, and with the return of the filth comes the return of the disease. The dysentery comes back first, a low, miserable, rumbling tide, and then the typhoid returns. You see a man from a nearby tent being carried to the hospital tent, his face flushed with the high fever, his eyes delirious. The false hope is over. The dream of a new, clean camp has died. The grim, fatalistic reality sets back in. You realize that the enemy is not the ground you camp on. The enemy is the very nature of the army itself. It is a great, beautiful, patriotic, and profoundly self-contaminating beast. It is a creature that carries its own sickness with it. Wherever it goes, it is a city that, no matter where you build it, will immediately proceed to poison its own well. One evening, you are at your washtub, working late. The setting sun casting a long, sad, golden light over the great city of tents. You are washing a shirt, and you see them. The unmistakable dark. Bloody stains of the flux. It is a sight so familiar, so crushingly routine, that you feel a wave of despair wash over you that is so profound, it almost brings you to your knees. It is happening again. It will always happen again. You look out at the vast, beautiful, and doomed encampment, and you understand that this war has many fronts, and the one that you are fighting, the quiet, endless, and unwinnable war against the simple, deadly, and inescapable reality of human filth, is the one that will ultimately claim the most lives. You wring out the stained shirt, your hands raw, your heart heavy, you hang it on the line to dry. A small white flag of surrender in a war that you know you can never win. The war ends. The great armies of the Union and the Confederacy dissolve, and the men who have survived go home. You, the camp laundress, the quiet observer of the army's long, miserable, and intimate war with its own filth. You also go home. You return to your small town in the north, to a world that has been irrevocably changed, and to a life that will be forever haunted by the things you have seen. You are an old woman now. Decades have passed. The Civil War is no longer a current event. It is history. It is a great, grand, and increasingly romantic story told in books, and in the speeches given by politicians on Decoration Day. It is a story of heroic generals, of glorious battles, of a nation forged in the fires of a noble conflict. You sit on the porch of your small, but clean house, and you read these histories. You see the paintings and the illustrations. They always show the same things: the great sweeping charge at Gettysburg, the grim, determined faces of the soldiers at Antietam, the stoic, noble profile of Abraham Lincoln. It is a clean and honorable story, a story of courage and of sacrifice, and you know that it is, in its own way, a lie, a great, necessary, and patriotic lie, because you were there, and you know that the true story of the war, the story of what killed the most soldiers, was not glorious. It was not heroic. It was miserable and shameful, and it took place far from any battlefield. The ghost that haunts you is not the memory of cannon fire or the sight of enemy flags. It is the memory of the smell of a regimental hospital tent. It is the memory of the endless piles of filthy, disease-stained laundry. It is the memory of the gaunt, hollow-eyed faces of young men dying of the flux, of typhoid, of measles. You know the great, terrible, and unglamorous truth of the war. You know that for every man killed by a Confederate bullet, 2 men were killed by a bacterium they could not see, a germ that they drank in their own contaminated water. The official statistics of the war, when they are finally compiled, will bear this out. Of the more than 600,000 soldiers who died, more than 400,000 of them died of disease. The war's most prolific, most efficient, and most merciless killer was not a general named Lee or Jackson. It was the simple, mundane, and deadly filth of the Army's own camps. You have lived your life with the legacy of this knowledge. You have a reputation in your small town for being obsessively, almost neurotically, clean. Your neighbors find it an amusing eccentricity. They do not know that you are a woman who once lived in a world where a single cup of unclean water was a death sentence. They do not know that you have washed away the evidence of an apocalypse with your own two hands. Sometimes, you read in the newspaper about the great efforts of the government to find and rebury the Union dead. You see drawings of the new national cemeteries, with their neat, endless rows of white headstones. It is an act of national remembrance, an attempt to give dignity to the fallen. But you look at the orderly, geometric patterns of the graves, and you know they tell a sanitized story. They do not tell of the chaotic, anonymous trenches that were the camp graveyards. They do not speak of the miserable, unheroic deaths that the men buried beneath them actually suffered. This is the great debate that will always surround the memory of your war. The struggle between the romantic, heroic narrative, the lost cause of the South and the glorious Union of the North, and the grim, dirty, and far more complicated reality of the common soldier's experience. You are one of the last living witnesses to that reality. One summer afternoon, there is a parade in your town. It is for a reunion of the local post of the Grand Army of the Republic, the Organization of Union Veterans. They are all old men now, with white hair and stooped shoulders. They march down the main street in their faded blue uniforms, their old battle flags flying. The townspeople line the streets and they cheer. They cheer for the heroes who saved the Union. You stand on your porch and you cheer with them. You feel a great swell of pride for these old men, but you see them with different eyes. You see them not just as heroes, but as survivors, as the lucky few who made it through not just the battles, but the much deadlier war against the sickness of the camps. You know that their greatest victory was not over the enemy, but over their own environment. A young doctor has recently set up his practice in your town. He is a modern man, with new ideas from the medical schools in Europe. He speaks of the work of men like Pasteur and Lister. He speaks of a new and wondrous thing called germ theory. He tells his patients that they must boil their drinking water, that they must wash their hands with soap, that they must keep their homes clean to prevent the spread of disease. The townspeople find his ideas strange and a little extreme. You listen to him and you smile. You could have told him all of this 60 years ago, the story of your life, the story of your war. It comes down to a simple, quiet moment at the end of a long day. You are in your own clean kitchen. The room is filled with the warm, comforting smell of baking bread. You go to the iron pump by your sink, and you pump a stream of clean water into a glass. You wash your hands with a piece of fragrant, milled soap. This simple act, this luxury that you never take for granted, is the culmination of your life's great, terrible lesson. You look at your own old, wrinkled, and spotlessly clean hands, and you remember the mountains of filthy laundry. You remember the brown, contaminated water of the creek. You remember the faces of the dying boys in the hospital tent. The great histories of the war will be written. They will be filled with the names of generals, with the maps of great battles, with the rousing speeches of politicians. But you know the secret history. You know the story that is not often told. You know that the fate of the nation, the outcome of the great and terrible war, was decided not just on the battlefields of Gettysburg and Shiloh, but in the miserable, filthy, and disease-ridden breeding grounds of the Army's own camps. And you know that the war's greatest lesson, the one that truly changed the world, was not about courage, or tactics, or even about freedom. It was about the simple, life-giving, and revolutionary importance of a clean cup of water and a simple bar of soap. Or the old woman stands at her kitchen sink, the clear, clean water running over her hands, The memories of the war, of the camps, of the endless, terrible laundry begin to fade with the last light of the day. The ghosts of the soldiers she knew, the boys who died of the fever, are at peace now. Her long vigil of remembrance is over. Let the image of her, in her quiet, clean, and peaceful home, be the final image of our story. Let her find her own well-earned rest. Your own journey is now complete. Leave the muddy fields of Virginia, the crowded tents of the Civil War, the great, sad history of a nation at war with itself. Return now to the calm and the quiet of your own time, your own safe space. The world outside your window is at peace. The air is clean. The water is safe to drink. Feel the stories of the past release their hold on you. Feel your own body grow heavy. Your mind grow still. The only rhythm is the gentle, steady rhythm of your own breathing. A quiet and reassuring sound in the stillness of your room. The darkness behind your eyes is a soft and welcoming place, a sanctuary from all the troubles of the world, both past and present. There is nothing more to learn tonight. There are no more battles to be witnessed. There is only the simple, profound, and healing act of letting go. Allow yourself to drift on the quiet tide of sleep, to be carried away to a place of deep and calm and dreamless rest.